FB Storytime Inc. is proud to present to you a story of the Titanic. Prologue. Construction on the Royal Mail ship Titanic began in 1909 at the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast, Ireland. She was the largest ship of her time and the pride of Britain. She was designed and built with 16 watertight compartments, each with their own automatic watertight doors. In the event of disaster, if 4 of them flooded at one time, the doors would close and the ship would remain afloat. This was thought by many to make her unsinkable. The ship was launched in 1911, and by April of 1912 she was ready to sail. She set sail with 2,200 passengers on board, including her chief designer, which made circumstances more ironic when 4 days into her voyage she struck an iceberg. The iceberg breached 6 of her 16 compartments instead of the 4 she was designed to withstand. Bulkheads and watertight doors could do nothing to hold the water back. From this moment on, Titanic was doomed to sink. The following 4 stories were written by me when I was in middle school, between the years 2006 and 2008. Recently I found them and decided to share them with you. In the present day, I edited them and corrected the grammar so they would flow better, but essentially they are the same as when I first wrote them. The drawings you are seeing were done by me between the ages of 7 and 13, from the years 2002 to 2008. It is only appropriate that these stories and images go together, and I hope you enjoy them. Part 1. The Child's Story. A loud, ripping, screeching sound awoke me and my parents. We knew something was wrong. My friends and their parents came to our cabin and talked about what's going on. Then suddenly, 4 or 5 men came running across the hall shouting in terror. One said, "Everyone get up! Leave for your lives to the higher decks! There's water in the bow!" Our parents could hear the panic and grew worried. My friends and their parents went to their cabins. A few minutes later, stewards ran down the hall, slamming on people's doors. Get up! Get up! Everybody up and get your life belts on now!" A steward came into our cabin and startled us. He threw open the coat closet and threw a bunch of life belts on my bunk. He quickly told us that as soon as we have our life belts on, we were to come up on deck. So we did as we were told. Our friends met us back at our cabin. We went out and up the stairway, only to be blocked off by a gate. The men were furious. Then my friends and I remembered the crew stations we snuck through to get to first class. We told the adults about this. Many opposed the idea because the area was restricted to passengers, but it was the only way. My friends and I tried to think out our steps. We went up another flight of stairs and found the steward's station. We went through the door, down some pipe-clad hallways. We came to the large kitchen we'd snuck through before. It was empty. We passed a few crates here and there and went into another corridor. We made a few turns here and there and came to a ladder with a hatch at the top. The corridor ahead was flooded with gushing water. We said to our parents, "This is the corridor we went through." To many, all hope was lost. A woman pulled out a rosary from her pocket and began to pray. The men then said, "Let's climb up the ladder." One climbed up and opened the hatch at the top. Babies wrapped up as well as children and the elderly were passed up. Water began to puddle the floor. The rest of the adults in our group climbed up and closed the hatch behind them. Part 2. The Passenger Story. When I boarded the Titanic, little did I know of the danger ahead. I was 1 deck above F when the ship struck the iceberg. I awoke from a slight shake, knowing it had come from the bow of the ship. The loud sounds of the engine ceased. I warned my friends and got dressed immediately. We got up and went outside into the hall. We saw people coming up from deck F, complaining about a flood in the halls below. When we got to the stairs and climbed a few flights, we were cut off by a gate and a mob of people ahead of us. A rumor went around that they were going to open up the gate in a few moments so we could go up to the boat deck. We waited 20 minutes. The people grew restless. Then the steward said that we were to wait until the first and second class left the ship. Then there was an angry mob. Me, my friends, and several other people ran to another stairway. Only 3 of us went up, and to our surprise, the gate was still open. The other 2 sent me down to alert the people. When I did, they all ran up excited, some still trying to put on their life belts from before. As for me and my friends, we didn't have any. So my friend Johan and I went down to our cabin to get life belts. When we reached E-deck, puddles of water were on the floor. We got to our cabin and spent 5 minutes pulling life belts from under the bed. When we left, we each had 6 life belts in hand. The water was up to our knees. We ran back to the stairwell. My prayers were answered. The doors were still open. As we began to run up the stairs, there was a companion who was panicking, escaping his flooded cabin. We tried to calm him, although he couldn't speak English. He was from India. I gave him my life belt. We brought him up to where our group was, for we asked them to wait for us. The rest of the life belts we brought went into the crowd to the women and children who didn't have any. We kept track of each other and the number as we moved to the higher decks. Then, we encountered a barred doorway blocking the second class from the first. There were about 4 or 5 second-class passengers with their life belts on in the hallway. A second-class passenger, Isaac was his name, offered to go back to his cabin and get me a life belt. I went with him and asked Johan to let me know if the group has found a doorway into first class. By now, I knew that my cabin was flooded to the ceiling and the ship was on a tilt. When the second-class passenger came out of his cabin, he gave me his spare life belt. As we walked back through the corridor, Johan ran up to us and said that the group found a busted open doorway to first class. Someone before us had broken through. We now had more people in our group than before. We went into the first-class decks, and as we climbed the grand staircase, we marveled at the statues and details on the walls, especially the glass dome overhead with a huge crystal-beaded light in the middle. It gleamed like no other I'd seen before in my life. We got off the staircase and reached the boat deck just in time. The last boat was ready to leave, and the officer, desperate to get everyone off the ship, including the men, was shoving anyone he could find into the lifeboat. There were many people, but it looked like there was just enough room for my friends. When everyone got into the crowded boat, there was only 1 seat left. I said to Johan, "I'll be fine, trust me, get into the boat." We argued, but he took the last seat. Then the bold officer ordered, "Lower away!" I walked to the railing on the side of the ship. I stood there, put my arms on the rail, and looked down to the water and the lifeboats rowing away from the ship. Part 3. The Stowaway Story. Today is April 10th, 1912. I'm in Southampton looking for a costume so I can stow away on the Titanic. I don't have enough money to buy passage in third class. I found a crewman's costume and went to work. Luckily, my crew outfit didn't give the officers at the entrance any question. I worked my way through the crowds to the boat deck. Another officer caught me out of the corner of his eye. He looked at me suspiciously, then walked into the bridge. At that moment, I ran all the way to third class. People were still boarding. They were going in and out of their cabins. Luckily, I found an empty cabin. I hid under the bed and stayed. There was just enough room. Then, the ship whistled for takeoff. When I thought the time was right, I got out from under the bed and left. Back at the dock, I also bought a steward's costume. I memorized my cabin's number and snuck into the steward's stations, found the room that held all the keys on the ship, and took the spare key to my cabin. Because of this access, I also got to eat. Because I lived among other immigrants, it was easy for me to come and go as I wished. I left the cabin early in the morning and came back late at night, while everyone was asleep. Thus, I enjoyed the sea air like everyone else. This is where I lived for the next 4 days. One time during the voyage, I snuck into first class, particularly the Turkish baths. It was like being in a royal palace. I didn't expect to get caught by anyone because the ship was so big. The people were nice. The weather had gotten very chilly. Sunday was the coldest day of them all. I didn't know that later that evening, the ship's security was out on patrol looking to arrest me. The officers, however, only had a vague description of what I looked like, and no one even considered to report that the spare key to my cabin was missing. It was only a few minutes after my time to turn in. I was standing on the back deck of the ship. A small celebration was going on for a crew member. I believe it was his birthday. Then I heard a bell ring from the front. Then a vague bump, a low scraping sound, and ice cracking. Then I saw it. A massive iceberg passed me by. The celebration stopped. After that, it had gotten colder. Even though it didn't feel like much, I was worried. I went down to third class to see what was the matter. I noticed that the loud roar of the engine stopped and the halls were quiet. Within minutes, the halls were crowded with people. They were coming up from 2 decks below shouting to get a life belt. I told people we could get more information up on deck. We put on our life belts and left. We went up through the deck and corridors quickly. The crowds were moving fast. We went down some more hallways and up some more flights of stairs. Then we reached the first class area. We went through 3 rows of first class cabins before we found the first class staircase. We went up decks from the water to where it was warm and dry. We stood in the corner of the lounge while the music played and people were laughing and having a good time. We were surprised. The ship was sinking and these people weren't worried at all. It was then that we realized from the walk from our cabins until now the ship was slanting forward. A steward looked at us suspiciously and ran to tell an officer. Before the officer could turn around and spot us, we were gone. We immediately moved to the staircase. People were crowding up it, complaining about the foolish rumor that the ship was in danger. "Everyone knows the Titanic is unsinkable," said one person. Life belts were being passed to the people from the steward in the middle of the crowd. From the window, I could see crewmen lowering the lifeboats. They were working feverishly. A rocket was launched and blew into a bunch of twinkling lights that fell out of sight. The passengers moved on to the boat deck. A steward by the door was helping people over the door's threshold. We went the back way so we couldn't be recognized by the steward and came out onto the boat deck. Then another rocket was launched. Many were dazzled by the sight, while many others raced to get into the boats. Officers were shouting into the crowd, "Women and children first!" Part 4. The Newlywed Story. A rumble awoke me. I was surprised to hear that the engines under me had stopped. I went outside into the hall to see what was going on. The steward assured me that nothing was wrong, so I went back to my cabin. Since I was awake, I went to write a letter to my cousin in Queenstown. As soon as the pen touched the paper, a steward came in, pardoned himself, and pulled from the coat closet a bunch of life belts. He told me to go up to the boat deck right away. He asked if I had anyone else living with me in the cabin. I said, my wife. Then he bid me good night. When my wife came from the ladies' room, she asked me what was going on. I told her. We got into our life belts and left our cabin. Neither of us thought to pack our luggage. Needless to say, according to the directions of the steward, we didn't have any time. People from the third class were running up the hall, pushing against the stewards. They were shouting, "Water! Water!" Hearing this, my wife and I zoomed up the stairs through the first class to the boat deck. When we got there, I heard a man tell his wife it was 12:50. I realized that I left my pocket watch in my cabin. It only took a few seconds for my attention to be turned from the watch. A rocket was launched into the sky. The crowd was dazzled by the boom. There was a big flash and the gradual fall of twinkling lights into the frigid water. Then, the crowd moved forward as the first boat was lowered. The officers struggled to keep order. Then I noticed something peculiar. From the time I'd gotten on deck until now, the deck had gotten to a tilt. I feared the ship was sinking, but I scolded myself at the thought. Surely the Titanic is unsinkable. Fear overcame me again, and I came to my senses. I escorted my wife through the crowd to a lifeboat that was less crowded. With the help of an officer, she got in, and I told her I'd meet her in New York. I quickly ran into the crowd so she couldn't follow me and would stay in the boat. The officer kept her there. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. When the crowd lessened, I walked to the other side of the ship and leaned over the railing. I said a prayer. I walked away from the deck, hoping for a miracle. The ship was on a steeper tilt, and I saw 5 people plunge into the icy water. The people went from calm to panicking. People in mass crowds began to move toward the back of the ship. I took the stairway to B deck. When I got there, people were crowding the door to the promenade deck. There was shoving and punching to get a spot in the currently lowering lifeboat. The officer and crewmen in the boat were holding the crowd back, shouting that there was no more room in the boat. In the midst of the mayhem, I saw another man get shoved over the railing and into the North Atlantic. I stood in the middle of the empty lounge, alone. Back in '07, when I wrote this down, I had some idea of how each of these stories would end, but never wrote it, so I'll try to conclude it here. The child and his mother made it to the boat deck and were put in a lifeboat and were rowed away from the ship. The passenger, stowaway, and newlywed all ran to the stern. As the ship began its final plunge, its structure was strained and the ship broke in half. The impact of this caused the 3 men to fall onto the deck. Then as the stern of the ship turned vertical, the 3 men climbed the railings so that they were standing against the bars as the ship descended into the sea. At 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, Titanic sank beneath the waves, taking 1,500 people with her. I figured, since they're each telling their story, they must have survived by either swimming to a lifeboat or getting pulled from the water. In the case of the newlywed, he's happily reunited with his wife on the rescue ship Carpathia, safe and sound, after a night they'd never forget. Thank you for watching this video. If you found value in it, then like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.